Sure. Thank you so much for giving me the floor, Bill. I'm sure you can all see my screen now. As Belinda mentioned, this was actually supposed to be a session that we were to have yesterday. So in a sense, we're taking a step back, right? Because Mr. Olu has given us something very insightful and has also delved into some of the blue economy sectors that we have. So we are taking a step back, but I'm sure you'll find that it's still well worth it so that we can re-assimilate all the details that we've had today. Okay, so I have here a map that I want you to take a look at. A few months ago, earlier in the year, there was a map showing the true size of the world's continents that stirred up some very strong debates whether or not the Mercator projection of the globe, which is what we are often shown in schools, was purposefully popularized as some means of making Africans oblivious to the immense wealth of resources that we really have at our disposal relative to the you see on this screen a map that I want to show you, which has the Mercator projection just supposed against the real map of the world. Now, here's why there's a difference in the two maps. Let me pause here first. Belle, quickly, can you see my screen? I want to make sure that it's just a slide and not the presenter view, right?
Yeah, we can see the slide.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I was talking about why the maps are different. For purposes of nautical navigation, the Mercator projection stretched up and sort of warped the sizes of countries that were further away from the equator. And so what this means is that in the maps that we are all used to, Europe, USA, Canada, and Russia, for instance, are all projected as much larger than they really are. So in reality, the red portions on this map reveal countries and continents, right? So take a close look at it and just observe some of the size discrepancies with the Mercator projection, which is the one that we are used to. So why am I touching on this? Essentially, the whole uproar about the popular Mercator projection and how invariably deceptive it is has centered on a united Africa's true landmass relative to other continents, right, and other countries, and how this truly projects the wealth of land-based resources that we have as a continent. Looking at the real map showing us the actual sizes does bring to bear the vast amount of land that we have as Africans. But we should also consider looking at the other side of the coin, right? If we consider Africa's borders as, largely surrounded by the ocean, because in a sense, Africa is like a huge island, then we begin to realize that we have also perceptually underestimated the wealth of our maritime estates relative to other continents simply by looking at the Mercator projection, right? And just to step back on this one, you see here all the major countries fitting into how, some of the major countries fit into Africa. And on the right side, you can even see that the entire continent of Europe fits into Africa, and there's like just so much excess space on the sides, right? Let me move on. Okay, and I want you to also think about the fact that Africa has the largest number of coastal states than any other continent. And it's very easy to overlook this fact because when you first look at the map of Africa, it's very tempting to think that Africa has more landlocked states, right? You look at it and you assume that majority of the states in Africa are landlocked. but the map that we have here highlights the states that have a coast in blue. And so you look at it carefully, you realize that Africa actually has a large number of coastal states, 38 coastal states actually. And this is even more profound when we recognize the fact that Africa's blue economy is not just limited to the ocean, right? It includes our lakes, our rivers, underground water, and then the productive sectors that draw from these, like fisheries, like aquaculture, tourism, maritime transport, energy, and a host of other related sectors. And this argument on the blue economy you'll find in this book, the title of which I've placed on the screen. It's more of a handbook. It's called Africa's Blue Economy, a Policy Handbook. And it also points to the fact that Africa's blue economy is not always blue, right? The blue economy concept in its entirety includes a holistic appreciation of the economic benefits that can be derived from sustainable exploitation of both freshwater and oceanic ecosystems across the continent. Now, I may not mention this fact again, but I still want us to keep it in mind as we think of all the prospects for taking advantage of the blue economy, that the blue economy is not always blue, right? And then here's another strategy document you might want to read. This is Africa's Blue Economy Strategy. I think it's important that as young Africans and as early career ocean professionals, we familiarize ourselves with the strategy document, right? So let's take a look at the continent's blue economy sectors. And I know you had a bit of this discussion in your previous session. So real quick, just to make sure we are not all tuning out because of Zoom fatigue, I just want everyone to please put in the chat box the blue economy sectors that you know of, just as many as you can remember, at least from the previous section that you just had. And then we'll compare these to what I have to see if there's something that's missing. So I'll give it just a minute if you can just drop that quickly in the chat box. I'm hoping to get some responses so that I know that you are tuned in to the session. Okay, okay. So I see Mohammed has indicated fisheries, aquaculture, shipping, and tourism. Does anyone have something that Mohammed left out? Okay, fishing, ship repair, insurance, great. So I noticed that some of you were taking note of some of the unique areas that Mr. Aholu spoke to. Tourism, energy, policy. Okay, super, super. Okay, so I will continue at this point, and you realize that there's no way I can comprehensively cover all the blue economy sectors, right? So I've just highlighted, some of the major ones that are existing in Africa currently. And then we will, of course, talk about a few of the emerging sectors that are worth looking at. Okay, so here we go. So I have here these which I will speak to briefly: marine fisheries and aquaculture, maritime transport or shipping. We've spoken extensively about. Hopefully, I'll give this discussion oil and gas, maritime tourism, and then of course as an emerging blue economy sector, renewable energy. And then I don't have this on the slide, but then there are also other emerging sectors like marine biotechnology. We saw that in Mr. Aholu's slides. And then seabed mining, a controversial one, I must say, especially when we talk about seabed mining in those in the deep sea bed beyond national jurisdiction. Okay, so let's start with the fisheries subsector, right? The fisheries sector. Currently, it's believed that fisheries and aquaculture contributes more than 24 billion annually to the African economy. And the fisheries sector alone also provides employment for more than 12 million individuals across the continent. And this constitutes fisher folk, this 12 million figure I just mentioned constitutes fisher folk and then those directly engaged in fish processing. But you know that the fisheries value chain is more extensive than that. So if we are to extend this to other points along the fisheries value chain, then we would have an exponentially higher figure, right? And to put it in context, since I'm from Ghana, let me just give a Ghanaian example, right? In Ghana alone, we have over 2, that is people who are either directly engaged in the fisheries sector or who can be found along Ghana's fisheries value chain. And here's an interesting fact that has previously been presented by the World Bank. The multiplier effects when it comes to beneficial engagement in Africa's fisheries sector is really fascinating. Because for every fisherman who is actively engaged in fishing in Mauritius, for example, at least one other job is created inland. Okay, and in Guinea, the ratio is even higher. So for every fisher who's engaged in fishing activities, we have more than 3 jobs that are created on land. So we have clear evidence of how the fisheries value chain can positively impact livelihoods on, of several other individuals who may not be directly engaged in fishing. And this is crucial to remember because there's always the tendency to think that fisheries only benefits coastal communities or individuals who live along the coast. So it's important to recognize that it's much more than that, right? Now, beyond, of course, the benefits to Africans as an economic activity, there are more than 200 million Africans that depend on fish as their primary source of protein. And just to contextualize this, right, the FAO has also projected that by 2030, total consumption of fish is likely to increase by 27% for Africa. So what does this mean? You might think 200 million is a huge figure, but by 2030, that is likely to increase marginally. So we see here that Africans need fish for nutrition as much as they need fish to support their livelihoods, right? And when it comes to fish, it really doesn't end here, because for years, for decades, actually, the fishery sector has been considered as one of the most viable avenues for advancing women empowerment across the African continent. And why? Why do each of you are familiar with play an integral role in Africa's fishery sector? And I'm not talking about just, fish processing, because we often think that women's engagement in fisheries occurs in a very limited sense, usually as fishmongers or processors. I'm sorry, I just got an alert that my internet is unstable. So let me double check. Can everyone hear me okay? Belinda.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Okay, so I was mentioning that we often think of women's engagement in a limited sense, right, as fishmongers or processors. But the truth is that in several parts of West Africa, women are increasingly shifting from the periphery of the fisheries value chain to the core, right, to the core of the fisheries sector through direct ownership of canoes. So we have several instances where women actually own canoes, where women actually control the revenues derived from fishing activities. In fact, it's even been found that in some households, yes, you could have the men going out to sea, but most of the time the resources come from the women, the resources to acquire the canoes and to continue, fueling the fishing activities come from the women. And the exciting thing about women moving to the fore of fisheries is that it has several other undertones for economic advancement and sustainability, right? So here on the screen, we have an image of a 68-year-old woman who defied all odds by becoming the first fisherwoman in her community in Senegal. So her name is Yayi Bayam Diouf, as I've put there. But she didn't just stop at becoming a fisherwoman in a sense. She took active steps to empower and to train several other women in her community to engage in sustainable fishing and aquaculture practices as a means of earning a living. And so we see several ripple effects from, just her active engagement in the fisheries sector. And of course, there are several other notable instances of women taking charge of fisheries conservation and sustainable fishing within their own communities across Africa. So we can, come to this recognition of the fact that empowering women in fisheries can have a ripple effect across communities. So just to seal this in with this final slide on fisheries, fisheries as a blue economy sector really produces three-pronged benefits for the continent, right? We have a benefit in terms of supporting livelihoods, in terms of providing nutrition, and then in terms of empowering women and other vulnerable groups across the continent. So now let's talk about maritime transport. I know you've discussed shipping issues extensively in your previous session, but let's see if I can give this a new angle. So we know that Africa relies heavily on ships and ports to service its intercontinental trade. So of course, what this invariably means is that maritime transport is one of the major anchors of our economic growth and advancement as a continent, right? So most of you are aware of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, AfTA, that came into force to some extent on 1st January 2021, which of course is a significant milestone for Africa's aspirations, both politically and economically. Now, the whole intention of AfTA is to create this huge single market for the continent's 54 states. And while the expectation, it's very easy to think that since it's more of a trade agreement, that we'll be talking about trade between, landlocked states. There's, this expectation that we are talking about trade by, road or by plane or by rail. In fact, the first goods that were traded under the regime were carried by a Ghanaian cosmetics, from a Ghanaian cosmetics company to Guinea on 4th January by ship, right? So we get a sense of the fact that the shipping industry or maritime transport is very important to Africa, right? And also to just dig deeper into why it's important, you just think about the fact that there's a high level of international attention that was given to issues of piracy in Somalian waters, garnered, in the past from the international community. And then we also see that level of attention being given to the Gulf of Guinea in recent times, right? When the levels of piracy and armed robbery at sea went up in the region. So the central message that we can get from this is that Africa having, having safe, secure, and well-managed maritime transport routes is in the interest of the global community as much as it is in the interest of Africa. And we can definitely begin to look at this and play on it to our benefit. Just this simple recognition that this maritime trade in African waters is important to Africa, but it is also highly crucial to the global community, because the Gulf of Guinea along the west coast of Africa, for instance, contains vital trade routes, right? Vital sea lines of communication. Okay, so how about what quite a number of you indicated when I asked about blue economy sectors, because I think I did see something on oil and gas, if I'm correct. So no doubt, oil and gas is one of the notable blue economy sectors. In fact, when you talk blue economy, most people just think shipping and then oil and gas, right? And of course, the oil and gas sectors across the continent have to some extent been very controversial, because on the one hand, there's the belief that Africa's oil and gas resources can be key to guaranteeing our economic security and to driving economic development. But then on the other hand, there are concerns of corruption, right? Of an equitable sharing of benefits from oil and gas exploration. And we can add to this, the fact that oil and gas represents a finite resource, right? So that's also there. And the fact that in the current global order we are in, there's this constant push, right, by the global community for a transition to renewable energy resources. So there are statistics that, of course, also indicate that Africa's energy demand in 2040 could be 30% higher than it is today, even though on the global scale, the increase in global demand for energy will just be by 10%. So we have all these things that I want us to keep in mind, right? There's a push for transition to renewable energy. There's a constant perception that oil and gas could also hold the key to our economic advancement and to securing our energy security. And demand is also likely to increase. So we cannot downplay the importance of the sector. But as youth that are primed to, advance economic security or energy security on the continent, we really need to start thinking about more sustainable pathways to exploiting this resource. Not only in terms of the environment, but also in terms of ensuring that there's at least some level of intergenerational equity, that the benefits from exploitation are also sustainable in a sense. So just summing it up, we need to think about sustainability in terms of the environment, and we also need to think about sustainability of the benefits, right, to future generations, because this is a finite resource that we are talking about. So I'll lump this with the issue of renewable energy, because there are notable prospects here. We know that the energy demand will increase. I just stated that. But at the same time, we have to leverage on the energy transition, right? To ensure that we are not trying to serve the world of 2040 through the unsustainable energy sources of 2024. We have to start learning about the emerging marine renewable energy alternatives and then invest in them. And the oceanfront offers several options, right? Whether we are talking about wave energy or energy derived from ocean currents, or whether we are talking about energy generated from offshore wind, we have to find ways of, as youth, deepening our knowledge on continent energy security. And the ocean provides a very good solution to several of these problems. So let me take a moment to ask this. I think I'm within time. So within the context of Africa, right, maritime tourism is often argued to be one of the most crucial sectors. I know several of you may think that shipping is important. Yes, it is. I'm not disputing that fact. But within the specific context of Africa, there are some resources that point to maritime tourism as one of the most crucial sectors. And the truth is, as ordinary individuals, we hardly see the relevance of maritime tourism beyond the issue of recreation or generation of tourism revenue. So, can anyone just quickly tell me why maritime tourism is so important? Maybe just unmute and speak if you can, or you could drop it in the chat if for some reason you can't speak. So otherwise, the floor is open. What makes this sector so unique? What makes maritime tourism such a unique sector?
Hello, Steph, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So I would say, aside generating income for the government, maritime tourism pushes a government or the neighborhood to keep the space clean, so like it helps breed a healthier marine environment.
Right. Yes. That's definitely one of the things I was hoping to hear. Thank you, Enoch. And who else? Is there someone else who can add to that? Anyone? Okay, if no one, then I will proceed. So yes, I think Enoch summed it up very nicely. Because the thing about maritime tourism is that if it is sustainably managed, it could, generate wealth and benefits for indigenous coastal communities, right? Because local people get to benefit more or less because they are directly employed in maritime tourism sectors. But as Enoch mentioned, it's a means of preserving the integrity of coastal and marine ecosystems. So it's important not only for ensuring other thriving blue economy sectors like fisheries, because in event you definitely have to try to effectively conserve and manage your resources. But it is also necessary for addressing, bigger issues like climate change concerns, right? And enhancing coastal resilience, because the more we work towards preserving the integrity, our ocean health and resilience is built, right? And the more the ocean can play a crucial role in regulating climate. And we all know that Africa is disproportionately affected by the impacts of climate change, right? So we really need to hone in on the ocean as a solution. And then also, it's just a way of garnering collective indigenous efforts on the preservation of marine ecosystems, because indigenous people and individuals in local communities are really holders of great knowledge. When you tap into their knowledge, you realize that they have very unique approaches to ensuring conservation of marine ecosystems, which we would otherwise overlook. Sometimes we are too busy with our heads in the clouds looking for the bigger solutions, while our local communities have simple solutions that are very effective. So, of course, for this to be, effective, the needs of coastal communities must be prioritized, right? Maritime tourism can never be sustainable for people if large tracts of coastal lands are just completely handed off to private companies to develop, and if the communities are actually prevented from having access to the ocean. So there are these new paradigms about building maritime tourism industries with the needs of coastal communities at the fore, right? Because once you get the coastal communities actively involved, then the benefits sort of ripple all across. And so let me conclude on this note. We've talked briefly about some of the blue economy sectors, but really this shouldn't be the end of it. The blue economy is constantly evolving. It's constantly being reshaped and remolded by changing global trends and by, the dynamics at the global level. And one thing that is central, at this point is the issue of sustainability. So we want to prime ourselves to exploit the blue economy and to tap into its benefits, yes. But we also want to make sure that we act as effective stewards of the ocean. It's not just for this current generation, but it's also for the generations to come after us. So one thing that we should always contemplate is how to effectively integrate elements of sustainability in mapping out our blue business ideas. It's also important to consider, those ideas that also address the current pressures facing the ocean, right? In coming up, I guess what I'm trying to say is in coming up with blue business ideas, sometimes it's not just about seeking after economic prospects, although that is important. Sometimes when you come up with solutions to some of these sustainability concerns that are being faced, you will find that there are actually huge economic prospects in those solutions as well. So in summary, we must take care of the ocean so that the ocean can take care of us. Thank you very much. I will stop at this point for questions, if there are any.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for such an insightful presentation and for keeping it within the time. We are really grateful. We will now have 20 minutes for questions. So if anyone has a question, please, you can use the hand emoji or Miss Schandorf will attend to that.
I think there's a hand up.
Anthony has, yes. Anthony, please go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for the very insightful lecture. And it really closely ties to the first lecture. And from the question I wanted to ask during the first lecture, I think you really helped to answer it in a way in your lecture. And it is that we can talk about the benefits we can derive from the blue economy, but we should also think about the sustainability part, that is the blue part. So we mostly focus on the economy part, and then we leave the blue part behind. Now, the thing is, now that you've touched on that, and we know that we also need to develop our potential when it comes to the blue economy, but the issue of developing our potential and the fact that we are still so much behind in terms of developing our blue economic potential in Africa, is that something we can see as an opportunity or as something good? Which in a sense means that we haven't really gone into the over-destruction of our blue space as others have. So we can now plan carefully as we try to develop further. So is that how you also see it?
I think your question is an answer in and of itself, right? Because it is true in a sense, when we even, let me just take this to the larger discussion of climate change, for instance, right? what do we notice? We talk about climate change. Then we think about the fact that the developed countries, that have highly advanced economies, have been the greatest emitters so far, right? And that's because their development necessarily drove them to make use of resources in an unsustainable manner. But then we also have the fact that we as Africans, slowed down our pace of development in a sense. So our blue economy sector is underdeveloped, but then it has great potential. Now we get the opportunity to sort of rethink the approaches that the more developed states have used in advancing their blue economy. And we get the opportunity to come up with innovative ways of ensuring that we do not go down the same unsustainable path, right? So that even as we are exploiting, our blue economy resources, we are doing so in a manner that guarantees that there's enough, not just for our generation, but for future generations. So I think there are two sides to the coin. I mean, you can't say that it is a negative thing that we haven't been able to advance our blue economy, but I think it's timely that at this point, the narrative is shifting. The focus is now on renewable energy transitions. And so we have a new opportunity to see how we can play on that to build something better than what has been done by previous developed states, right? Yeah. I think there are I saw something in the chat box. Should I go ahead and address that?
Yes, I think Alberta wants to ask, in your opinion, how do you think we can incentivize the sustainability? So yes, please go ahead. You can address it.
Okay, thank you so much for your question, Alberta. I think the youth are the solution to this particular issue, to the issue of incentivizing the sustainability of blue economy advancement. It's something that African youth need to take up because it is in our interest more than it is in the interest of the older generations. Africa is a youthful continent. I'm very sure I heard something about this in the previous discussion, right? We have, large numbers of youth. In fact, we are the most youthful continent on the globe. And then at the same time, we are the continent that bears the greater brunt of some of these major sustainability concerns that have come to the fore of international debate. So we have, a whole lot of youth, we have high youth unemployment, and then we have unique sustainability challenges to address. And I always say this, but, guess who is better at addressing these challenges? I once came across a reading that indicated that creativity starts with questioning dogma. This was by a renowned neurologist. What does this mean? It means, in a sense, creativity begins with asking the right questions. And if you just think about it critically, at what point in our lives are we great at asking questions? It's when we are young. It's when we are at this stage of our lives. We are curious, we ask more questions, we are able to come up with innovative solutions. So this is not to say that the older generation has no role to play, but it's just to point to the fact that as youth, we have this unique capability to come up with innovative solutions. So this is really our problem to deal with. We can't sit down and say that is the problem for our leaders and for our governments, and we want to wait for our governments to adopt the right approaches to, sustainable advancement of the blue economy. No, we have to take the stand. We have to share whatever messages that we think are crucial. We have to be at the fore of driving innovation. So just as an example, if we are going to sit down and wait for, some, I don't want to say politicians, but let me just say, if you want to sit down and wait for some politicians to get up and own certain blue businesses across our countries, then what will happen? They are an older generation. They are not really going to be impacted by some of these concerns that are really knocking at the door of our generation. So they are likely to be insensitive to environmental sustainability concerns, right? And so if we leave it for them, that is what's going to happen. But if we as youth begin to educate ourselves and see how we can build our blue capacities in a sense, then at the end of the day, we start to benefit because we will come up with unique solutions. We will benefit from them. They will be sustainable because we are more concerned about the environment. And, we'll be all the more better for it. And, just to throw this in there, statistics actually show that young individuals are more concerned about environmental issues than the older generation. By far, the difference is marginal. So I hope I've answered that question.
Yes, I hope so. Thank you so much, Steph. Please, do you have any more questions for Ms. Schandorf? I think your presentation was straightforward and precise. So
I hope people were paying
you've answered your questions during your presentation.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think Anthony is back. Anthony, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think also because you raise some really deep issues, and so people have to process them in their minds, and so probably they'll have lots of questions afterwards. Yeah, but for me, I think you started with a very important point. You showed the very faulty Mercator projection and how it tries to diminish Africa, because Africa is the center of the earth, and so by stretching the edges of the continents, what they do is they increase what's the other continents, and then they kind of reduce the size of Africa, and all of that is to make us, in addition to, like, it could be by design, it could also be by accident, but what it has done is that even in our minds, it makes us feel inferior. Makes us feel that we do not have as much as we do have. But the thing is, now that we are coming into this knowledge, and now that we are also beginning to know that we have more than we do have, that more than we've been told we do have, and what would you advise the young people to do, especially with concepts that are out there that try to diminish what we know is our greatest strength, our youthful population, by telling us that we are overpopulated, when we know that the whole world can fit in Africa and there will still be a lot of space for another world? So what would be your message at this point to the African youth?
Yeah, thank you so much. Like always, your question also has the solution, right? Because I think for me, it comes first from a recognition of some of these things. Like sometimes we don't understand just how much of an effect this has on our minds. But I think that it was really eye-opening for me to just recognize the difference between the Mercator projection and the map that shows the real sizes. Because like you always think of Africa as, just relatively small in terms of influence. And then like you have the US and Europe and Russia, and there are these great world powers. And so you wonder, why is there such a scramble for Africa? And then you look at this map and you see it, because you saw how, a lot of these great states can just, fit into the African continent. So we have, immense land resources. We have immense blue economy potential. But I think for me, it's important that we spread this message, because subconsciously, if we don't, everyone else will be living with that level of, slump, that slumpy feeling about Africa as a continent, about Africa and its potential, right? And then again, like we really need to think about what it means when we say we have a youthful continent. And you like when you walk through the streets of Europe, it's very visible. we say we have a youthful continent and we don't really contextualize it like in Africa, because I'm like, oh, but how is this true? I mean, I still see so many old people. Well, you go to other parts of the world and you really find that the population is very old. Like there are more old people than there are young ones. And what does this mean? Just think about what this means for their productive sectors, right? Because young people have the energy, they have the zeal, they have the enthusiasm. And so they are able to, achieve more. But if you have, a 60-year-old forced to do the work that a young person can do, you will notice a difference in productivity levels. So we need to recognize this as, something that should be to our advantage. And think about the fact that it also means that we are able to garner more individuals towards a cause, right? Because youth are more actively engaged on social media, for instance. So if you were to have a message to share about the African continent, it's easy to get youth on board with that message. If you decide to get loud with your message, it's easy to rally masses of youth to actively engage in supporting a specific cause, which is why I think the ocean agenda should be like a youth agenda, right? We can have so many African youth, coming together and, projecting their voices louder for the ocean, so that at the end of the day, policymakers like just make noise in their ears until they have no choice but to address some of the concerns that we are raising. And in instances where they do not address those concerns, then guess what? We have masses and we can rally ourselves and address those issues, honing in on the different skills and expertise that we have as African youth. So yeah, I hope I've addressed your question.
Anthony, I hope your question has been addressed.
Yeah, perfectly. Perfectly. And that's actually what I've been talking about, that we Africans need to stand up, the young people. We need to stand up and we need to speak up. And yeah, you said it right. Empowerment is the first step. Knowledge is another step. And it would not make sense to have this large population of young people who still believe that they are inferior. And so we will just go into the next century more like the same way we are now. So it will be good that we get empowered, and knowledge like what Stephanie has just shared, knowing your potential, knowing what you have and trying to protect and conserve it, while at the same time developing economically, socially, is what would move Africa to greater heights in the near future. Yeah, thanks, Stephanie, for that message.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so I think we can wrap up your session, Steph. We are so grateful that you were able to join us today. And thank you for your insightful presentation.
Thank you too for having me.
All right then. So we will just move on to our interactive session for today. I think having 2 sessions in a day has taken longer than we anticipated. So maybe we would interact briefly in the next 15 to at most 20 minutes so that we can call it a day, and then meet again tomorrow. Anthony, are you ready for the interactive session?
Yep, very ready.
Okay, so I shared the question for the day with you, but I'm going to post it here as well so that everybody sees it. So in the interactive session today, we would like to discuss, in this era of sustainability, how do we think, how would we assess the status of shipping in Africa with respect to sustainability? And what would you suggest are the key drivers and barriers towards attaining sustainable shipping in Africa?
All right. Thanks, Belinda. And that's a very important question, actually. And it's much deeper than it appears at first sight. And so to begin, I would like to say good day to you all, and good to meet you all again. And first, I would like us to first address this aspect, this term sustainability. What is it according to you? How do you understand it? What does it mean, sustainability, in regards to shipping in this sense? But what is sustainability? Can any one of you just quickly tell us what they understand by this term? We'll have like 5 to 10 to 15 seconds to wait for a response. So you can just raise your hand and then we start talking. So what is sustainability and why is it so important? Why are we even talking about it now? Sustainability in the shipping sector in Africa. Okay, so it seems that probably none of you has a specific idea on this question, but I will just go ahead and kind of reiterate something Stephanie mentioned earlier, that even though we have the urge and the desire to develop economically and financially, but we should do that in a way that does not affect the ability of our current generation and of future generations to continue enjoying the same goods and services that our environment and especially our oceans provide for us. So that is a core principle of sustainability. So basically, we have resources. The environment, the ocean provides us with goods and services. And Stephanie also said that we have to protect the ocean in order for the ocean to take care of us, which is so true. And so that is everything we need to know about sustainability. It has to continuously provide us those goods and services. So we have to extract just enough to not cause the ecosystems to collapse, so that we continue getting from the ocean and also for future generations. So when it comes to shipping, how would you assess the status of Africa's shipping sector with regards to sustainability? How sustainable is our shipping sector? If anyone has something to say to this, I think you should raise your hand and let's discuss it, because it's very important. We need also to know what are some of the indicators of sustainability when it comes to shipping. And most of those indicators have been mentioned in the 2 lectures we've just had. 2 amazing lectures, I must say. So what could be some of those indicators of sustainability which we got from the lectures, and how sustainable is our shipping sector in Africa? Anyone wants to start and break the silence? Are you even getting me, or am I muted? No, I'm not muted. Can someone indicate that you're getting me? Belinda, can you get me? Belinda? Hello? This is strange. Hello?
Hi.
Hey, can you get me?
Yes. I'm checking the chat. Yes. Yes.
Okay,
No one
because
has
everything is
hear you.
everything is so quiet, so I thought that maybe there's a problem with my sound system.
No.
All right,
I can hear you.
all right, very good then. All right, so guys, please, I think from yesterday and also today, you must have learned one thing, that it's not by staying quiet that we're going to make a change. And so we really need to start talking. And even if it's something we should not know about, this is the opportunity to know about it. And so we need to talk about some of these very important issues. All right. And somebody said, your voice keeps breaking. Maybe it's my internet. Yeah, probably it's your internet because I think Belinda can get me.
Mm-hmm. I
So,
can.
all right, so I'll give you guys a clue. So when we talk of sustainability in the shipping sector, there are some components or some indicators of sustainability from my understanding. So we'll look at what the shipping sector is, and we'll look at who owns the shipping sector in terms of the different activities that are going on there. And then we look at how well the shipping sector is regulated. Then we look at what is the contribution of the shipping sector to Africa's economy and African trade. And then we can also look at aspects like how well is the shipping sector connecting Africans and African states, right? So is the finances that derive from the shipping sector, are they really getting back into our economy and helping to boost our economic strength? Is that what we have seen from the two lectures? So these are some aspects of sustainability. And at this level, can we improve? What can we improve in our shipping sector to get to that level where we can call sustainable? Because sustainability has to do not only with economics, although economics is quite important, and we don't even have that yet because we are still as far behind as anything compared to other continents. It has to do with the ability to boost the economy, and we are still so far behind with regards to that. It also has to provide social services, has to help to develop the social capital of the countries, and we are also still far behind. It has to employ as many youth as possible because it's the biggest contributor to world trade, and we are still far behind. So how sustainable is the shipping sector in Africa? Now, can anyone say something to that? At least I've laid down some. Yeah, Monday. Thanks for being the first one to.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
First, I would like to say this mentorship program has really been an eye-opener to me because for now, I don't really have knowledge about our blue economy. I don't know much about it, but I've been learning seriously. I must confess to that. So, and then what I will say is that looking at our shipping industry, based on what I've learned today, precisely from the first lecture and the second lecture. So, I tend to realize that, it was said by our facilitator then that the Africa, we don't build ship, we don't, the shipping services have been, run by the other continents. It's not really from the Africa. So, and then it was also highlighted that the marine transportation is one of the major means of transportation when they come to import and export. So because the goods that have been imported and the one that have been exported is majorly transported through the oceans, using ship. So this being considered, we tend to realize that the shipping industry is important and it really needs to be paying attention to. But with the fact that we don't really have the facility, one person asked a question, I can't really remember the name now. He asked that is it that Africans don't have the skill sets to build ship, or what's happening? So all those kind of things, they are really challenging, and then we need to pay attention to it. So considering all those factors, we can see that our shipping industry is not really sustainable at the stand now. So we need to put in more effort, and then enlighten people, and then contribute more into the aspects such that our shipping in in Africa can be sustainable. Because when we talk about sustainability based on the indices that you have highlighted before, we can see that most are lacking in the context. So for us to ensure that the shipping industry is sustainable in Africa, so we need to work hard, and then maybe include the governments to contribute to it and pay more attention to it, so that the revenue generated from the business and from the shipping industry, it can also be useful to the continent, and not that a high percentage of it is being sent to the other continent for management, for building, and other stuff. I think that's what I can say for now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Monday. I get the impression that you really got the information, you got the message from today's lectures, and that's actually very good. And I think you answered the question. And yeah, but I have one follow-up question for you. Now, given the fact that when we talk of sustainability, I enumerated some indices, but I deliberately left out others. And those others have to do now with environmental sustainability. So according to you, how would we ensure that our shipping sector brings us the benefits we need and we deserve economically, socially, but also ensure that we do not go the same path which the other developed countries have gone with regards to the effect of shipping on their ecosystems and their marine biodiversity? Do you have any ideas you can contribute to that? This is addressed specifically to Monday from his last response, but I mean, if you need time to think about it, I think we can take Benjamin, while Monday you can come in later. And Monday, your hand is still up, so you.
Okay, let me think about it, sir.
Okay. All right, so
Mr. Benjamin can go ahead.
Okay, all right. So we take Monday later. So Benjamin, please go ahead. Benjamin, you have some background noise. Benjamin?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I had a very wonderful session from the first presenter and the second. what I want to talk about the shipping sustainability. From what I understood, in Africa, we don't have a very sustainable shipping sector, whereby most of the, let me say, the benefits we derive from the shipping sector is just to satisfy our crave for foreign goods and tax those importation. And also to talk about the sustainability part, most, let me say, environmental problems associated with the shipping industry comes, let's say, the use of crude that leads to carbon emission, uh, ballast water, invasive species, monitoring, acoustic pollution, and other assisted issues. So when the first presenter was presenting and he was talking about team building an app, and I wanted to ask a question in the sense that when we look at modern trends in the ship industry, most of the modern shipbuilders are looking forward to autonomous shipping using electricity, and also going back to the old sail system by using, let me say, more artificial intelligence and machine learning to, let me say, produce more environmental friendly shipping operation. So what I want to say, in Africa, are we also leveraging on those skill sets, or we are just using the normal traditional method that we know, that we use to operate the diesel engines and the, let me say, the diesel engines that are currently, let me say, not environmental friendly. Thank you.
Hi, Anthony.
Yeah, I think Benjamin is done, right? Because it was really breaking. I'm still struggling to see whether he's still.
Yes, I also couldn't really hear what he was saying, but I think his comment was more on the fact that we don't really have the right infrastructure in place even to have a sustainable shipping industry in Africa.
Yeah, I think he also mentioned some points related to the environmental effects of shipping. With regards to, I think he talked about ballast water and something like invasive species, and that's also very true. And so,
Okay, I don't
yeah,
think everything he was saying, so I'm sure I missed that.
yeah, I think he mentioned that, and that's actually in response to the question which I asked to Monday, and that's quite good. And so we have a few points here already, which I have taken down. And so at this stage, I think we are on the right track because this subject is actually quite complex. It's quite complex because it's not a straightforward thing like we do in science, where if you see X, you know that something has happened for X to be there. But this has very strong implications in economic, in politics, in geopolitics even. And so it's not it doesn't have really straightforward answers. Questions on sustainability. So it's good we are really heading in the right direction. But I'll also just give the floor to someone else who who would like to contribute to this question. Is our shipping sector in Africa sustainable? And how can we ensure that moving forward, since we are still underdeveloped compared to other nations, we have the opportunity to develop a thriving and sustainable shipping sector. How are we going to do that? So, any takers?
Sorry, before you take the anyone's comment. I think we need to be wrapping up because we had a double session today.
Oh,
We've
so
kept them for a number of hours. So
okay, all right. So let's do like 5 minutes more then.
yes, in about 5 minutes, I think we can wrap up.
That'll be good. That'll be good. All right, so guys, I think let's talk then. Let's talk. Let's make this quite interactive within the 5 minutes we do have, and see how where we get. All right. So I'll just briefly summarize from our discussions right now is that we have a shipping sector in Africa, but our shipping sector at present is characterized by a number of indices. And it is now left for you to tell whether these indices can be described as sustainable or not. For instance, we do not own most of the ships that ply our waters. We do not own most of the shipping companies. We do not own most of the businesses that use those shipping companies. And most of the things we do and how we use those the shipping services is for importing rather than exporting. So we export raw materials like we used to do in the past as colonies, which in effect we are still very much colonies. And so at the same time, we do not have the expertise to understand that the changes that are happening in the world with regards to this particular sector and how others have developed this sector, the shipping sector, the mistakes that they have made in regards to environmental sustainability. We do not understand most of these things. So can we say that our shipping sector is sustainable? And if not, how can we address this situation as young people who will probably take the lead in the near future to move Africa to a more sustainable path and a more prosperous path? How should the shipping industry look like for us to call it sustainable? And yeah, sustainable. How should the African shipping industry of the future look like for it to be sustainable? So I would like to imagine that you have the task to develop the shipping sector in Africa and to develop it into a sustainable sector. What would you target? Anyone wants to take that job? All right, guys, I think like Belinda mentions, there's also the tiredness, and I can understand that. So I think we should wrap up today, and that you can have some rest and continue tomorrow. And I'll conclude by saying that the shipping sector, as we have heard today from these very inspiring lectures in Africa, has a long way to go. But that long way is not a curse, it's not a problem. I think it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to decide which path we want to take. It's an opportunity for us to learn from the mistakes of the others, but it's also an opportunity for us to ensure that this is one of the biggest sectors that contribute to economic development and growth in the world. And Africa, with the long coastline, has an opportunity to make something out of this and to create jobs for the large number of young people and bring in as much income as possible to our states to develop other social amenities and infrastructure. And so we should be able to take advantage of this, like we heard from the first lecture, and also in addition to that, ensure that the advantage we are taking and the economic benefits we'll derive will not affect the ability of the ecosystems, the marine ecosystems, to continue providing us the goods and services which they are currently providing. So we do not pollute our waters by the shipping industry. We do not cause maritime accidents if we do not regulate the shipping industry properly. We do not cause significant conflict between shipping and other maritime sectors like fishing. if not properly regulated. If we can succeed to do all of this, then we would be able to talk about a sustainable shipping industry, a sustainable shipping sector in Africa. And I think this is a vision for the future of Africa in regards to the blue economy and shipping. All right, thank you. I think that's my conclusion.
All right, thank you so much, Anthony, and thank you, guys. I think having two sessions today was a bit draining for them, so I think most of them have gone silent. Yeah, so if that was the reason, we sincerely apologize. We are meeting tomorrow morning, same time, 1100 hours GMT. Today, I noticed some people were still complaining about the time zone, so I would advise you check the exact time at your end so that you don't miss the starting time. So thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll meet tomorrow morning. Bye.
Thanks, Belinda. See you tomorrow.
Sure, thank you.